let's see. So pursuant to general laws, chapter 30A, section 20B, following the governor's declaration of a state of emergency in the Commonwealth arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, the committee will meet virtually utilizing Zoom technology, and all votes will be taken by roll call vote. So our first order of business is a roll call. Adam Amon.
Present.
Gina Stino.
Present.
Mike Buckley.
Present.
Fran Collins. Well, we see you, Fran. So Patrick Kennedy.
Here.
Has Mark Maggi joined us yet? He is not. Okay. Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
Meg Wheeler, and Bob Hillman. That's me. So I had a couple of conversations today, all conversations that were completely compliant with the open meeting law, in an effort to make sure that we sort of had a notion of what to do at this meeting that would make it effective. And I think the consensus was that we would, kind of take another look at the financial update and then talk about the order in which we expect to see pieces of the budget and which departments we would like to come and speak to us and present their budgets directly. And then we can do some housekeeping with minutes and whatnot. But really, I think if we come out of this meeting having filled in our calendar for the next 2 months with prospective topics and inviting particular boards to come and join us, we'll have made good use of this meeting. I think as a result of our conversation, for those of you who haven't done this with this committee before, the usual suspects are the two public safety departments, the DPW. We often hear from IT separately, and then the what I sometimes refer to as the town hall budget, the sui generis town expense line budget, and of course the schools. If there were any other department who was moving its needle very substantially, I think we would ask them to come in and talk about that a little bit. But we don't typically hear from the Council on Aging or the library or anything else unless they feel like there's a particular reason to be heard. The other thing I think we'll ask the departments to do, a couple of years ago, we started and then kind of abandoned the practice of asking the departments who are coming in to give us all kind of a one-page set of bullet points of highlights, particularly areas in which their budget request either goes up substantially or down substantially, upcoming expectations, things like that. Just some things to structure the conversation. The various department heads can talk and love to talk, and appropriately are great at talking at length about the broad questions and the details of what they do. I think we can pick and choose to some extent which ones we need to hear. I'm happy to hear anything that everybody feels thinks is germane. And then scheduling this intelligently is going to take some doing, particularly with respect to getting earlier access to the school department to get a sense of where they're at, rather than waiting until the very end of the process, which has been the case in the past couple of years, where there's really no avenue for input from this committee because it's the warrant's going to the printer in 2 days, and that's pretty much it. So With that in mind, I know I had put liaison reports on the front end of the agenda, and therefore we should probably at least ask. But then I think we'll roll into a preview of the warrant and the financial update in short order. Does anybody have anything from the various committees with whom they're affiliated? I see Fran's hand.
Some good news from the alternative energy. They finally announced that the aggregation package has been approved by DPU, and it should be up and running by around July. They're guessing. So that means that everybody in Cohasset, Situate, and Marshfield will be enrolled in this aggregation program unless they choose not to. They're going to be able to buy wholesale electricity and hopefully allegedly reduce our rates substantially. So that was good news. And the the mini grids that they're trying to put together around the town, that's a lot of work has been done on that, and that's sort of coming together. That's going to be pretty interesting. And the search for other solar sites is very actively underway. So they're a very busy group of people. The other piece of information, which you probably already know at the harbor, the work is well underway to improve the boat launching ramp at Parker Avenue, but I don't have any other harbor study committee information other than that.
Can I ask I wanted to ask Fran a question. Did anybody else have anything from Fran that they would have? My question, Fran, is my recollection with the energy aggregation plan was that we endorsed the last thing that was in front of town meeting. I think the last time we had a live town meeting, and summer of 19, spring of 19.
I think so.
And my recollection was that was a vote to take preliminary steps, and that the matter would come back to town meeting. Is that not a thing, or do we know, or does Chris know?
I'm not. I don't have an answer to that. I think that from the way they talked about it was pretty much fait accompli, but I could very well be wrong. I've been wrong before. I know that. So.
Okay, Chris, do you know whether there's anything that we could expect on the warrant about approving that?
Yes, so it did hit town meeting twice. It was approved both times. The next round of this would be for it to be packaged and bid, and then the select board would make the final call on whether or not it's a favorable bid. So that would, as Fran said, that'll happen this spring.
Okay.
And then there'll have to be a lot of public education done at that point. So yeah, it doesn't go back to town meeting. It's been there twice and gotten unanimous approvals twice.
Okay, I was only remembering the one, so that's, thank you, sorry.
But
Mary,
there'll be more coming this spring, so.
Mary, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just as we move forward to think about who we're going to hear from when, regarding the school's budget calendar, just to back it out for ourselves, they vote final adoption of their budget on March 16. They have a public hearing on March 2nd. So it would be incumbent upon us to talk to them prior to that. And the only day that I think actually makes sense is February 16th, where they also have a meeting, but they typically begin at 6 and are done, try to be done by 8. So if they came to see us later, perhaps that's a possibility. Just throwing that out there as we look to who's coming when, because I think it's important we see them sooner rather than later.
I very much tend to agree. And since coming to see us will still be virtual, I think, unless there's a.
Well, they are holding their meetings in person at the Learning Commons, but they could certainly zoom in to us.
That was my thinking. So I think the thought with that component, some of you may remember that the school budget process typically involved what was rolled out as a joint meeting of the advisory committee, the select board, and the school committee, which was more of a presentation. There were lots of pictures and charts and things like that, but it was much more of a presentation than, perhaps an analysis. I think my inclination subject to the committee's interest, is to ask chair, the superintendent, the business manager, and possibly one other school committee member to come to us, consistent with our bylaw, and have a discussion, really focusing on that cheat sheet we talked about earlier. Where are things moving, and why, and what sort of advice can we give them, and what is our takeaway in terms of input into the final budget. So that's kind of my thinking. Does anybody have a reaction to that? Because I think a joint meeting of 3 boards is a crowd. It's not really productive.
I guess I'd say, Rob, if we get the presentation before the meeting, then we can have time to look at it and then ask questions and maybe analyze it. So if that's,
I think you're right. I think you're right there too. To ask them to, maybe to have our 2 liaisons, give them a series of topics to be prepared and to provide us some data prior to the meeting, and not, immediately prior to the meeting, with enough time to frame good questions. I'm sorry, Gina, I saw your hand.
Yeah, on this agenda, on this budget calendar that they have a TBD for that presentation meeting with the 3 committees. And it looks like they're planning to do it prior to March 2nd, which would be their public hearing, which is great. But as Mary said, we really need more time than that so that we can really look at the figures, digest what they're trying to present. Last year, we got things so last minute that it wasn't really possible for us to give a full look at the budget. So I would suggest that if we're going to ask them to come to us on the 16th, that perhaps we tell them that we would like the information by then. I mean, when I was on the committee, we had regular budget updates, and at every meeting, once we initiated the process, each meeting we had an update in our packet. So I can't imagine that they're not still doing that. They must have an idea of what they're looking for. So
Yeah,
I think
something
what I'm
I'd be
saying,
interested in, Gene and Mary, also is just in their budget, is just if they could highlight for us line items where they're hoping or expecting increases that are bigger than the levy, than the 2.5%. I mean, just given the size of their budget, anything they put over 2.5% seems to me, is a potential strain on the overall budget. So
right. And the typical item that is above the levy would be salaries, because that's contractual obligation. So we really need to have a feel for that. And I'm sure that they've probably already started discussing those things, because they are in contract negotiations. I don't know how far along they are. There was a delay because of obviously COVID and the pandemic and the live meeting process, but they must have an idea of what they're looking for.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I understand too that they got some grants over the last couple of years that they used, for spending. And I guess it would be interesting to know, how they spent those grants, i.e., did they, use a grant for an FTE, which now they're expecting that will be funded, in perpetuity, when we all know the purpose of a grant is that it's not. So things like that would be really helpful too.
I think that's maybe the critical issue. So what do you propose? I mean, clearly we put that meeting on for the 16th. Can the 2 of you sort of extend that and maybe give them a list of things that we would like by, say, a week prior?
Sure.
Absolutely. I think
And-
sooner the better too. They are, I was logged into their meeting, but they didn't get to us. They didn't get to any budget items in the first hour. So they could be talking, they're supposed to be talking about capital items tonight, but I don't know if they'll get there. But they should at least have at least a full week to kind of have a heads up to see if it'll work for them.
Right,
Yeah.
the 16th will be here pretty quickly. So.
Yeah.
So,
Have we ever done a cross-reference against the school districts around us about the different line items that I know, Mike, you were asking, diving into each individual one, but have we ever done that just to reconcile to see how we compare to others?
There was a lot of benchmarking done when I was on the committee. I don't know that they're still doing that, though.
Is that something we can request prior?
We could ask if they're doing it, but if they're not doing it, I don't know how we would make them do it.
Yeah. That's a big undertaking.
Huge
I
job.
was on the committee with Jean as well. And the other thing too, to keep in mind is a lot of times when you do those benchmarks, they're not apples to apples. Some districts have facilities and maintenance incorporated in the school budget, some are on the town side. So it's all a little bit different where the items show up. So it's not as, it's a big project.
We did try and pick, we had, I think it was 5 different towns that we benchmarked against for various line items. I mean, not obviously person to person, but we looked at, what's the word I want to use? We looked at the size of the town, the size of the school district, the tax base, how their budgets were apportioned. And it was pretty comprehensive and intense, actually. And there was one
That's how-
person who spearheaded it and did an amazing job.
And how long ago was that?
I've been off the committee for 2.5 years, so it was prior to that.
That would even be helpful just whenever that was done. Yeah, because I mean, I know in Hingham, we used to benchmark, not line by line, as you said, that's way too tough. That's
Right.
too detailed to do that. But just some of the bigger, just in terms of percentage of town budget, growth, things like that. I mean, you've done it, so I'm preaching to the choir. But it would be interesting to see that study, regardless of how old it is.
They might even still have some of that up on the
website.
They have the budgets from the last 6 years up on the Cohasset K-12. I'm just looking through really quickly the FY21 budget.
So the website is cohassetk12.org.
But if, Mike, if I put my finger on that, I'll send it to the committee, whatever the most recent.
That'd be great.
Unfortunately, I started to purge from the most recent to the past. I still have a 4-drawer file cabinet in the basement after 10 years, but I don't have the most recent things. I think the last budget book I had was, did I tell you I had 2016, Mary?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the last one that I have. And I was determined I was going to keep just the budget books, and they went away.
So there actually is, not to digress too much, but in the FY21 budget book, which is on the Cohasset K-12 website, there is a staffing state comparison slide. So there is that, there's staffing, there's teachers and paraprofessionals, leadership, student support and clerical support, like within the first 12 pages. So that is there. So that's very useful information.
Thanks. I'll look for that.
I don't know that they put those numbers in the last 2 budget books, but in FY21 it was there.
good. Anything else from folks who may be in touch with their respective committee assignments? Okay.
I mean, I did attend the Capitol meeting on the 25th of January that they ran through a couple of the areas. They did elder affairs, fire, and police from a Capitol, reviewed those Capitol requests. I'm happy to quickly give you a summary of that.
Sure.
Basically, elder affairs is asking for a new van. I guess they're rounding the request up to 75,000. They've got one that's currently a 2009, doesn't have a lot of miles on it, but I guess it's not really equipped with the necessary equipment to, get somebody, really help somebody who has a wheelchair or something like that. So they're looking for that to ultimately, I guess, be delivered in 2023, January 2023. Fire had 2 requests. One was for a cardiac monitor for $39,200, and the current one is a 2009, and they only have 9 years of life. So seems like the cardiac monitor is needed, and it's a pretty, it's got wireless technology, can transmit information to the hospital prior to arrival. The fire department's also asking for PPE for 2 new members to join. So you have 2 people retiring, 2 people will be hired, and they need to fit each new person with obviously a kind of a custom suit, and they give them 2 suits per person. That's 17,000. Police is looking, in their usual cycle of cruiser replacement. So I believe it's 2 cruisers for $119,480. And then base station radio for $13,960, which the current one is on its last legs. And they did also go into this discussion just about the facilities review for the police and fire, not part of this year's request per se, as far as I remember, but they need to. I went on a tour of the police station last fall, and it definitely needs some help, but they need some new lockers. They need better storage for pre-evidence. So for instance, when there's when there's a gun confiscated, they need to store it someplace and put it away before it goes to court. And apparently they've got 160 weapons that have been confiscated over the last couple of years that aren't really properly stored because they don't have the proper storage facilities for that. So that's a little bit of a eye opener. And I think they were looking, talking 85,000 for the lockers and the storage. And then they talked a little bit about the police station roof too. But that was very preliminary.
Okay, thanks. I mean, it'll be, I assume that we'll see all those twice, as we often do. We'll see it when the various services come in, and then we'll see them again from our friends at Capital Budget. So, okay. Anybody else? All right. So I see Don on the call, and I think we're within our rights under our agenda to ask for him to give us an update on the state of the budget and financials generally.
Good evening. I hope everybody received the December package from Tracy. I'm going to share it on my screen anyway. So we'll go through.
I didn't get anything. Did anybody else?
I don't see anything either.
Okay, well, I will.
Isn't that the one that was received on the 19th, possibly?
That's the one I have.
Oh, okay.
I
That's
believe.
the last one. Okay.
19. I can send it out. I just don't know if I have everybody's email. I can do it right after the meeting though. Or I could have Tracy reach out to you guys tomorrow.
It doesn't look like it's the same one, so it may be slightly different.
I think she sent the same one twice when I just looked, but maybe I'm wrong.
All right, well, I apologize for that. I guess we'll just kind of do it live here then. So all 3 funds, general fund, water, and sewer, all in good shape through December 31st. Looking at general fund first, revenues through December 31st, we're at 51.6% of our budget collected. local receipts are at 44.2% collected year to date. And it's actually in really good shape because our local receipts include motor vehicle excise taxes, which most of you understand is one of the biggest drivers of local receipts. And annually, that commitment is not actually billed and sent to residents until usually very end of January or beginning of February. So that we just sent out about 1.4 million in commitments. So 44% through December 31st is in really good shape. A couple drivers of that local receipts are our meals and room tax. We're almost at 100% collected just in our first two quarters. So
Sorry, which line item is the local receipts? I don't think I see it on the screen, or am I missing something?
Local receipts are on this tab here. So meals and rooms.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
The meals and rooms were at 99.7%. Another driver of this is license and permits, which is right down here, about 70%. The big driver on license and permits is definitely one, we have some projects going on in town that we've received some larger building permits for. Another thing that our building commissioner is doing, John Hallen, is he's preparing after every project a final affidavit. So as most of you know, you come in, you pull a permit based on the estimated cost of the project, and that's the permit value. He is then going through and doing this affidavit to true up and understand what was the actual cost of the project and then recouping any difference. So that's really been showing some great results. And then kind of looking at it from a year-over-year perspective, we're up almost $217,000 or 16%. And again, two of the big drivers there, our meals and rooms were up over 62% over the prior year. And then same thing with license and permits, we're up over 61%. You'll go up and down, you'll see large numbers percentage-wise, but they're all kind of small dollars. So that's why I point out these two are the major drivers. And then going back up to the first page where we're looking at expenditures, we're at 49.2% expended through December 31st. Looking through the departments, no issues are sticking out at this point. And remember, 49.2%, we have a few big upfront payments that are made in early July. One is our pension assessment, which is about $2.5 million, and then another probably about $500,000 or so for our various insurances, our property casualty insurance policy. Both of those are due the first couple of weeks in July. So 49.2% through December 31st, looking in good shape. So I'll stop here and take any questions before we jump into the enterprise funds.
Quick question on, I saw boat excise tax figures. They're really, really small. Why is that? It seems like there's millions of dollars of boats in Cohasset Harbor and in people's driveways around town.
So the boat excise, I honestly forget how I forget if it's a percentage of value. But I can get that information for you. It's very, very small, as you can see. And another thing that we do, so we probably collect actually, well, for budgeting about 7,800, we'll probably collect somewhere around 15 to 20,000 a year. Per state law, we have a receipts reserve for appropriation fund for waterways. So 50% of the revenues goes into this other fund that can then be appropriated at town meeting for really anything waterways and public access to waterways related. So you might remember in some of our previous town meetings, we've appropriated $10,000 at a time for various dock repair and seawall replacement. And then most recently, I think it was $80,000 for I'm blanking on the project, but another 80,000 related to waterways. I can get that information and send that out to you, but I can get you a little bit more information on how the boat excise is actually committed and the determination of the value for each bill.
Don?
Hey, Don, while we're on this page, just out of curiosity, the investment earnings line item, is there some kind of catch up in the second half of the year that gets us closer to budget?
I mean, we hope so. These, I believe, we should have everything through December posted as of this point. So 30,000, somewhere around there, is where we've been consistently budgeting. And the year before we had, I think 160,000 of investment earnings. So I can't tell you for sure that we'll actually hit that, but in years past, $30,000, give or take, is probably on target for what we hit.
Okay, is that tied to market performance? I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, this is just, we have a number of bank accounts. Most of our money is within various trust funds. There are some funds that earn interest, which is recorded here. So the bulk is more related to our OPEB stabilization, our various special purpose funds, which is not reported here. This is just local general, essentially, interest earned within the general fund bank account.
Okay.
Hey, Don, don't most of the improvements, funding for the improvements in the harbor come out of the mooring fees? That big one, I think, is that 80,000. I think that goes to the ramp improvement, but I thought most of the rest of the repairs to the floats and all of that stuff came out of the mooring fees. So maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
Well, so the harbor master does budget some money, I believe, for dock repairs within her budget, but not a lot of money. One thing a couple of years ago we started talking about was because mainly for kind of seawall replacement and patching areas, appropriated $10,000 a year or so, which I'd have to look to see where they're at with even spending some of that. But, and again, the more, we don't operate the harbor as an enterprise fund. So yeah, the mooring fees in theory, the harbor related fees are generated to offset and pay for harbor, but there's not a direct actual correlation to what comes in for the mooring fees versus what is paid for updating the moorings.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else?
So I guess
No.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked last time we spoke. The water tax that we're receiving, I would assume that it should be separated here, but you had mentioned the water department, but I didn't see any of that revenue. So why
Yeah.
isn't it
We're not quite
broken
there.
out on this? Not there
So-
yet? Okay.
It's in the next.
We'll get there in
part.
the next report.
Okay.
So
And then
no
what-
other questions? I can move
what's
right on to
inclusive-
water.
What's inclusive of the general government on the previous page?
So this whole report, local receipts is all general government, our general fund. So everything. So I guess to put it this way, in government, all revenue is general fund revenue, unless it is determined by a state law, a special act, or otherwise. All revenue is general fund. So you'll see other revenues for where we appropriate funds are water and sewer. Those are the other two appropriate funds. And we have grant accounts that we get money in for. We get gifts and donations. So the general fund is essentially all of our operating, as you can see, our property taxes, which is the big driver of our entire budget, state aid, local receipts, which is our motor vehicle excise tax and license and permits, and some various other fees. So when you look at water and when you look at sewer, those revenues are specifically generated from those two purposes. So when we get into water in a second, water usage, sales to Hingham to Linden Ponds, connection fees and things like that.
But scroll
Is that-
down a little bit, please. Yeah, can you just scroll down just a little bit? So on the expenditures there, though, the general government line item there.
Oh,
So on the
okay,
revenue
so-
side, that makes sense, but what is the expenditure, general government?
Okay, so I just mentioned the general fund, and that's the fund we're in is all revenues other than water, sewer, and other things by law. When you get into expenditures, we report based on function. Massachusetts Uniform Accounting System essentially breaks out all governments the same. So general government would include the town manager's budget, finance, treasurer, collector, assessor, legal. We get into IT, permits and inspections. Public safety would cover police, fire, harbor master, emergency management, schools. DPW is everything public works. So highways, tree and park, snow and ice, street lights. Human services gets into our veteran services, council on aging, culture and rec, library, senior center, library and recreation, and then debt services. General fund supported debt, state and county assessments is essentially an offset to our state aid. Employee benefits are all benefits related to all employees in town, pension, healthcare, etc. And then our property casualty insurance and transfers to other funds are separated out as well. And so, let me see. When I send out all the reports, you'll have, for the general fund specifically, you'll see it's probably a 40-page document, and you'll see all of the different accounts. And I think it would be beneficial for us to set up a time. I can go through all of this with you to kind of do, if you want to call it an onboarding, but be able to kind of walk you through all the financials and how things are set up.
That's fine. I was just curious.
All right.
Okay.
So we will move on to water. All right. So for December 31st, we're at 55.3%. Two largest drivers here, user charges, which is based on water use, 64.2%, and we have a big number, 362% of our system development, which is essentially our connection fees. Connection fees are at 195, mostly due to the connection of the 390 CJC project. Excuse me.
Which project is that? Is that the one at the
Is at the Stop and
Plaza?
Shop Plaza, yeah,
That's what I thought. Thanks.
sure. And then just looking at, this is a similar kind of report. But then year over year, we're down about 1%. But it's a year over year comparison. This does not concern me at all. FY21, we had an extremely large usage revenue based on a lot of use, appeared to be basically pandemic related, people being at home, using more water throughout that fiscal year. That coupled with a real rainy summer and fall, our commitments are down. Our commitments are down, I believe through December, our first two commitments, about 200,000, maybe a little less from the prior year. But again, as I just noted, and I'll go up to the top here, our usage charges are still at 64.2% of budget. So basically what that means, even though we're down year over year, we budgeted conservatively enough this year that we're meeting and exceeding our target through the first half of the year. And then when I go down and look at the expense side, the way this is broken up is basically general expenses, everything that covers their operation. We break it up to debt service, our indirect costs, and then our transfers to capital project, which is basically their rate supported projects that have been approved. Overall, they're 65.9% expended, but I tend to focus in on the general expenses because debt service and things like that are all kind of fixed, and they're paid based on specific payment schedules. So a lot of them can be front loaded and paid up in beginning of the year. So general expenses at 41.3%, looking in really good shape for the water fund through December 31st. Be able to, I'm happy to take any questions on this as well.
I have more of a comment.
Sure.
I have to say that as a citizen and as a member of this committee, I get really concerned when I recall that the Water Commission came to town meeting last spring and pushed through a pretty substantial water rate increase. And then 7 or 8 months later, we get financials that show just a huge surplus in their operations, including $150,000 over budget with regard to this system development, which is hookup fees for a large project that everybody knew was coming online. So I think we are going to get, the town is going to get, the Water Commission is going to get a little bit of blowback on rate increases in light of the operational surpluses that we're seeing. That's my comment.
Yeah, fair comment.
We get a, I'm sorry, Don, Patrick, would it, first off, I don't have my list in front of me. Who's our liaison to that particular body? Would that happen to be you?
I don't have my list in front of me either.
Yeah, but leaving that aside, I wonder whether we want to put them on our schedule of folks to see budget-wise, or perhaps maybe it's a matter for after town meeting to ask precisely those questions, because what goes up often can't come down, but sometimes it can. So,
But I guess let me, so that's somewhat abnormal. I mean, that was $150,000, I believe, connection. That's a one-time connection. You don't budget for that in an annual budget. You don't. I mean, because like you just said, Rob, you don't budget for that, factor that into your total operations, and then the next year you're cutting back service or you're cutting back something because now you're not going to have that same $150,000 connection. System development connection fees is really anything extra. To me, it's just a function of you have a surplus in the connections. It was unexpected. You weren't planning, you weren't building that into your actual operations. So you're expecting at least that amount to come out as retained earnings at the end of the year. Retained earnings, as most people understand, is similar to free cash. It's something that we use for one-time costs, capital items. And so part of our explanation when we walked through that rate study last year and explained how heavily our capital plan drove the study in the rates, you know, this is just something that we'll have to look at every year with the free cash or the retained earnings to fund projects, maybe with retained earnings versus debt. And every year you come back to budget based on the next year's assumptions. So the rate study was done in preparation of our capital plan. Every year we're still going to come back and take a look at usage, other trends. It's not going to be a consistent change in budget year over year. And I'm trying to avoid going down this rabbit hole, but I hear what you're saying, and from a resident standpoint, maybe it's concerning, but looking at it and just knowing this, you wouldn't want to budget that for a 1 year item. That's
Yeah,
just my-
the other thing that's a little bit surprising as well is how far ahead we are on the debt service line item with the 6 months, right? So we're currently trending at 77%. And so it would be nice to see what that debt service time horizon looks like over the next 5 to 7 years and when that is going to start decreasing in value. Because it seems like based on what was budgeted, if we continue this trend, obviously we're going to be over budget by 1.3 million or so.
No. So what I just tried to explain before is, so debt service, other than, that's why I break these out as general expenses, then you get into debt service, indirect cost. These are based on specific timelines. So 2.5 million, that's the number. That's the number. That's going to be the actual. So this is based on you issue debt at a certain time of the year. Now, most of this is all from years ago, and you have based on the companies that you borrow from, they give you debt schedules that are set, and it's usually July.
Okay, so they're just front loaded.
Exactly. A lot of these, we have payments, I believe, in July and August upfront, which I think is usually the first payment is a principal payment, which is the larger of the two. And then the second half would be principal and interest, or vice versa. But just the way it's front loaded based on known payment schedules.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions on water?
Hearing
The other
none.
question,
Go ahead.
and more for the commissioner probably, when do we get to negotiate with Hingham in regards to the sale of our exported water? And why is the revenue so small? Is it, and I guess, how much do we export?
So that's specific to that one development, the Linden Ponds development. I don't know when their last agreement was with Linden Ponds. But again, the budget's based on estimated usage. We don't sell a set amount of water. That is metered and billed monthly. So the revenue comes in based on actual bills. I don't know if
And
that
at
is
the same rate as the Cohasset residents?
that I can follow up and get some information for you. I don't know the exact rate right at the moment.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Don, you want to move
Yeah.
to what's next? Sewer?
Yeah, we'll move to sewer. Let me just make this note. A couple of things to look at after. That showing up?
Lots of things are showing up.
We're seeing your desktop now.
Oh, great. A lot of crap there. So, there we go. That should be better. All right, so sewer for December 31st, we're at 48.5. In line with expectations. User charge, we're at 52.4%. Same thing here, connection fees. Their connection fees they have not received a payment yet from the 390. These are just other various connections that have been made throughout this fiscal year. On the next page, 2 pages down, the comparison, we're down 12% from the prior year. Again, so sewer, their bills are based on water usage. So as I mentioned before, last year we had a big increase in the usage of water. We also had a big increase in sewer commitments and payments, or commitments and billing. So the decrease is really a result of that. And also, last year was the first year that we released all of the residents of their grinder pump fees. So we had quarterly commitments there as well. So you see grinder pump year over year is down almost 75 grand. And then another driver of the year over year change is just a timing of when betterments. There was a betterment payoff, or a couple of them last year. You'll see here in this line, a Little Harbor betterments. We had a payment early in the fiscal year that we have not had the same type of payoff this year. All of our betterments, whether it's Little Harbor or other areas in town, those are not committed till the third and fourth quarters. So we don't see much activity other than maybe prior year catch-up payments. Or like I mentioned, last year we had an early payoff of a home or two. So that's what's driving the decrease. But again, overall, through the first 6 months being at 48%, we're in really good shape. And again, something else to point out is that's including, as I just mentioned, betterments are not billed until January or February. And so we have $660,000 of betterments we're expecting to commit. So that just goes to show you that, you know, through 6 months, we're at 48.5% without really collecting anything that we're expecting of fiscal 22 betterments. Then on the expenditure side, we're in good shape there as well, 66% overall, 44.7% in the general expenses. You have to take any questions?
Hey, Don, just so I kind of can sync up the revenues and expenses. So with the revenues, you know, we've got big pieces yet to come, whereas are the expenses just kind of accrued equal, like per month? So there's sort of a little bit of a timing difference between those two?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So again, debt service, we see it 83% already. That's because of our preset payment schedules with our lenders. And then general expenses, yeah, the biggest portion of that, and again, you'll see when I send out all the details, you'll have the reports and then the actual SoftWrite, our accounting system, general ledger reports to show all the line item detail. The biggest item within the general expenses is our contract with Woodard and Curran, who operates our plant. So yeah, that's billed monthly. I believe that contract's at about $800,000 or $900,000. So that's a really big portion of that general expense. So you're right on with that, Mike.
Anything else?
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for taking time out this evening. One of the things we're going to do is this evening is kind of line up our presentations, one of which will be, there'll be a variety of budgets, but particularly the town side budget. So we'll try and get that, from you at a convenient time and with enough, we'll get a sense from Chris when that's expected to be ready for us to look at. So, unless we have anything further from Don, do we? I don't know. I don't think so. Thanks. Okay, give me a second. For some reason, my agenda keeps disappearing. So I guess the thing that we do now is why don't we walk out the meetings we have scheduled and plug in the topics we want to address, and then we can do some minutes and then we can be done unless there's other business. I have us as having scheduled meetings on the 16th of this month, the 2nd of March, the 9th of March, the 16th of March is a placeholder, but I think it's going to be necessary, and the 24th scheduled so far.
And the 23rd?
24th, was it, or should that have been the 23rd? Wednesday the 23rd.
Wednesday the 23rd. Yeah. So 2, 9, 16, and 23 in March.
Yes. And the matters that, we typically take up police, fire, public works, the school department, sort of its own consideration, and then some other departments. Chris, you thought that it would be worth hearing what the IT department had to say about their budget this cycle, or?
Yeah, we've made a change in where one of the head counts is, and There's some increased costs for security. I think it's worth having a conversation about those, I think, and just hearing what Ron's doing. He gave by the way, there's a liaison that wants it. Ron gave a full backstage tour to the Capitol this week, yesterday, I think it was. So if anybody wants to he's not going to give you the secret keys, but he went through a list, explanation of what the plans were for Capitol, but also what's going on operating, how they monitor things, what's going on. So if anybody wants to deep dive a little bit more, just let my office know. We can plug in. That's usually during the day because that's when his people are usually available. But if anybody wants to get a little more behind the scenes in IT. But yes, IT, and then you said general budget, right? The kind of like the
And then
shared-
general budget, yeah. So one of the things, I mean, with the public safety budgets, because there are some collective bargaining impacts on the budget documents themselves, we'll need to incorporate an executive session in that conversation. I'll just make sure that gets done, and we'll have to be careful to do what's in public and what's not. Fran?
Excuse me, were those dates February or March you just gave for meetings? I marked them as March.
There was February 16, and then there were 4 meetings in March.
Okay, but that just so happens that the dates coincide in February and March. I just want to be sure I marked the right one. Okay, thank you.
Sure, not a problem.
Hey,
Mary?
Rob, sorry to interrupt. So with public safety, then when I reach out to those folks to present to us, should I have them plan to do both open and executive session same night? How do you want
Yes.
it to work?
Yes, I'm not sure that we'll necessarily need executive session with all of them. We will certainly need executive session with at least one, and it might make sense. I mean, we can talk about that before you can communicate with them. So Mary, I saw your hand, and then we can
Yeah,
jump
just
into.
real quickly, also, so people are aware, there are the joint sessions that we have in March as
Yes.
well. So Fran, do you have a copy of the budget calendar?
I do not in front of me, no.
Okay. So maybe after this meeting, what we should do is circulate joint meetings and our meetings. So everybody's kind of on the same page with that.
Yeah.
Also, I'm wondering if Dawn is still here, in terms of when we reach out to our liaison assignments, that form that Tom Baker had created that we were sending to the different departments, which was super helpful. Do you still have that? Should we send that out? How does that work?
I prepare that. So let me
Oh, do you?
basically
Oh, good.
depart, yeah.
I thought I wasn't doing it, so I'm very grateful
No,
to
so
hear that you are. Thank you.
do you remember, we actually had those last year as well. For any
Yeah, no,
department
they were great.
that came in front of you, we've been doing that for now, I think 3 years since Tom put that forward. So
Okay, awesome.
whoever comes to you, I'll get those prepared, and I usually put those together and I'll send them to you, CC the department head, so they're in agreement with the report before they come and present. But I'll prepare it, they'll present it to you, and then I'll also be at the meeting to answer any questions that they need backup on.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
Welcome.
Yeah, if I misspoke about not having them, that's just, I forgot, so I apologize. But they are useful because they can focus our discussion on, where the gauges are moving, and rather than the ones that are steady year over year. So it sounded like on the 16th, we were talking about asking representatives of schools to meet with us, and it sounds like they have a meeting prior, so we could put something in front of that. Chris, do you have any suggestions? Police, DPW?
If you're gonna do public safety together, I would hold them for maybe the 2nd of March.
Okay.
So why don't you do DPW that night?
It's a good idea.
Okay.
When I say DPW, that's DPW and its facilities as well. They're part of the DPW umbrella.
Yep. Well, that'll be that'll be plenty, I think, for that night. And then the second, we can make that public safety night with an executive session. And then the 9th, would it make sense to do IT and sort of the general town hall budget?
Yeah, that's fine. And again, to go back to, I was trying to pull them up in front of me. The joint meetings that we have scheduled, if they're not going to work necessarily, I'm happy to schedule them. If you would rather have some of these like not joint, that's fine too. I don't know yet if we're going to be back in person in March. Like the joint budget's really, the joint meetings really revolve around water, sewer, capital, those kinds of things. And again, so just let me know as we proceed into February by the 16th, if you think those make sense. I think the first one is scheduled for March, right, Mary? I think you have it in front of you. I don't have
Yeah, we've got a joint session for water and sewer on March 8th with the select board advisory, the water and sewer commissions, obviously. And then on the 15th, the joint session with citizens petitions. Do you know if there are going to be any? Might be
we
too
actually
early.
have- Of the deadline is the 14th. I know
Okay.
there's one that's active. We're meeting with that, those proponents next week with town council. It has to do, the subject matter has to do with allowing remote participation for town meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not aware of any others, but we have an open session next Tuesday. If anyone, for any citizens who are thinking about a petition, just to kind of clear it, make sure that's even a topic the town meeting can consider. And to talk about the form that's most appropriate to put in front of town meeting. So at the moment, other than what I just told you, there's no others that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then on the 15th, on the 22nd of March, the joint sessions are for capital budget and CPC.
I'm sorry, what date was that, Mary?
The March 22.
23rd.
Well, these are the joint sessions run on the Tuesdays because they run when the select board.
Yep.
But, and then the joint session for the schools is March 29th and April 5th, which is entirely moot because they voted their budget. So,
The
Yeah,
difference, I mean, that being something where in the select board, you folks have a different role than the select board does in terms of the school budget. That might be something that's separate. If you're gonna deep dive the schools early on, maybe a joint meeting there doesn't make as much sense. But again, let me know as we get closer to this.
So did I hear CPC in there anyplace?
yes, on the 22nd.
Same as capital. So those are joint meetings. I mean, depending on how we felt about it, there's a couple of approaches to these things. One would be if there's a joint meeting and we're satisfied that, well, maybe there are three approaches. One is do the joint meeting, it's good enough, we can ask our questions and satisfactorily decide to vote whether we recommend, or, I mean, we don't even really recommend chunks of the budget, although I suppose we can. I have to dig up how we've done that. But we can either attend the joint meeting and wrap up our discussion within the joint meeting or discuss it as some takeaways at a subsequent meeting, or we could say we're not really interested in a joint meeting and have our own. It sounds like with respect to the school department, we're going to have a meeting well ahead of the scheduled meetings, which strike me, I agree with Mary, they're at a time that's not useful. But things like capital and CPC on the 22nd, we could consolidate our meeting on the 23rd into that date and call it a day. I don't think we've got to make that decision now. In fact, I suspect we shouldn't make that decision now and maybe just get to our meeting on the 16th and spend a few minutes seeing how we feel about things going forward. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
I would think capital would be something we'd want to dig into as, deep as possible. And so, yeah, just let me know how you want to proceed. Because I'm liaison to that, and then Meg and I are liaison to CPC too. So if we want them to do something separate with us, I'm happy to reach out.
Okay. Yeah, the joint meeting's on the 22nd. We have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd. We can attend the joint meeting and ask our polite questions and ask them to join us on the 23rd to maybe grind it out a little bit more. I think joint meetings are, to relieve people of the necessity of attending, more meetings than are absolutely necessary. But this is a big deal, and particularly, the Capital Budget Committee, who has, a role in these things, getting a handle on, what their recommendations are going to look like and what work they're doing. I think the biggest story with capital, and maybe I'm wrong, is the framework. I mean, you talk about capital items at each town meeting and special town meeting, but all this occurs in a 10, 20, 50-year cycle of capital expenditure. And I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about how, what that projection all looks like. So I think maybe you're right. Not maybe you're right, Mike. I think you are right. We attend the joint meeting, but have a capital budget meeting the next night. I doubt that we need to have CPC come in a second night unless there's something in their asks that are particularly odd. Chris,
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts on
typically those are pretty straightforward. I guess sometimes I don't know if Cohasset has voted to do this, but the provision under which you can borrow from future CPC proceeds sometimes can be interesting, to say the least, to flush out, because you're taken from future revenues, and when you don't know what the match might be from the state.
Mhm.
But capital, I would think for sure.
Okay.
23rd.
Unless anybody feels otherwise, we'll put capital on the 23rd and let them know. Mary, you hand up?
Just in terms of, as I understand it, Chris, we will not have town hall coming to us. So they will not be. Are they asking for any kind of partial funding to carry them forward to special, or how is that going to proceed? I didn't quite make it till their portion of the Board of Selectmen meeting last night.
Well, you're teeing me up for what I want to talk about next anyway. So thank you. The Town Hall Committee presented to the Select Board last night and said they're eager, they're excited, they're moving along. That said, they number one, the contract price, the estimate, the cost estimate is at 15 million at the moment now, based on inflation and supply chain, all of that. Second, they're recommending that the new course be it's called contract manager at risk. It's called.
Yep.
It's a little different process where you bring someone on early. They're with you, and they're going to manage the contract. We have an owner's project manager. This is the actual. It's kind of a replacement for a GC, I guess, is a better way of putting it. And they come on early, and John Lemieux, who's our owner's project manager, can explain this vastly better than I. And I would recommend that you have him by one night or watch the tape from last night. You have to get approval from the state to do that. That said, they're recommending that process might be better. It'll contain costs better, and I think it'll drive more efficiencies. It's being used. It used to be used only in very large projects, but it's being used in smaller projects like this one proposed, because it's of the environment we're in, and it allows for a tighter control over supplies and things. So what that would require, so that would mean that the main expense ask will not come until the fall. What it does, though, means is that an ask of up to $200,000 will be made in the spring to bring that manager on now, earlier in the process, to guide through final design and bidding. So when you get to town meeting vote, that, you're in a different place. In parallel with that, so that's not coming to town meeting in the spring. So that's, there's, the field study is coming close. I've seen a quick look at a draft. There's some interesting concepts in there for improvements and potentially construction of new facilities. And that's not going to be ready for the spring either. The conversations will have started. So those might end up aligning a little bit towards the fall jointly. And they both have bonding aspects and CPC aspects. We know that CPC can fund town hall and CPC can fund fields and recreation facilities. And to your point, Mike, the town has borrowed from CPC future revenues before. The town actually has quite a lot of money in the CPC bank account, and was prepared to fund a very large chunk of the town hall project. So I would expect that fields, the town hall and fields together or separately will be asking and looking for funding with CPC and for long-term financing probably come fall. So so that while those come off the table for the spring, they're obviously they're kind of it's going to make a fall meeting a little more, there'll be some substance for sure beyond the usual in the fall.
We'll have to rename it from special to something else so that big issues can be discussed at the fall meeting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. That whole thing about, special town meeting occurring at regular and predictable intervals catches nobody by surprise, and to claim otherwise is not good faith. That's a George Bernard Shaw quote, I think. But
for what it's worth, there are towns that actually in their bylaws formally schedule a fall town meeting, and they call it fall town meeting. Cohasset has historically done a special, and again, the only reason it's a special is because it's not annual, right?
it's not annual. Yeah, it's other.
Because the law only requires you to have one a year. Some towns still do one a year, and they roll a special into the annual, and it's really confusing. So again, if it's something the town wants to do, you can always amend the bylaws and add a regular fall meeting. I mean, but that's a different question for another day.
Yeah,
I think
Mary, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
No, I was just going to dovetail on what you and Mike both said. I think that whatever we can do and the select board can do, and your office can do, Chris, to educate the community a little bit about that, because there are some very big, those zoning items are going to come back. You've got two big projects that are going to come back. People need to be aware that it's not just undone or unfinished business that's coming forward in the end of November, December.
And anyone who's been in town for, I don't know, a couple decades knows that the schools were all handled at a special town meeting. It was probably it's bigger than a regular town meeting, right? Wasn't it the Music Circus, all of those discussions?
All 2,200 of us.
Yeah, so by the way, I don't think zoning will come in the fall. I think that if there's zoning amendments that aren't some kind of an emergency, that probably won't come for another year. So yeah, I think those will probably come in the spring of 23. At this point, I'm not even sure if there's something coming in the spring now, because the planning board has had some fairly contentious discussions about matters, and I'm not sure if they're going to be ready to bring anything forward in the spring this year either. But we'll see. We'll know better the next month.
Okay. Anything else, Mary?
Question. So can we just review what we have right now?
Here's what I have. With all the caveats that, when I say something wrong, please check me up. DPW and facilities, followed by representatives of the school department. March 2, public safety with an executive session. March 8, there will be a joint meeting relating to water and sewer. March 9, we're meeting IT and the town general budget. The 15th, there's a joint meeting on citizens petitions, if any. The 16th, we have a placeholder meeting, and it's still a placeholder meeting. The 22nd, we have a joint meeting with Capital and CPC. On the 23rd, I think there seems to be consensus that we have our own meeting with the Capital Budget Committee or representatives of it for capital items. And then the 29th and the 15th are marked up as joint meetings relating to the school budget, which, TBD. That's what I have on my list.
So the other thing I need to add in there, Rob, is there's the routine warrant articles you have to review, the Chapter 91 and the revolving funds and all of those. Do you want to slot those in now, just so I know when we're going to put
Let's
those?
put them in on the 16th. It's an open date.
Because there's always, 6, 8 of those that are in there. I'm not aware of any big asks. The budget article should just be a one article thing. I don't think there's any water or sewer increases looming at the moment that I'm aware of.
Why don't we do this, Chris? If they're ready to be voted, or if some number of them are ready to be voted by March 9, when we're meeting on town stuff, if we can get through them, maybe we save ourselves a meeting, or we can deploy that meeting for something else. But if we can't, we can't. I mean, or we can squeeze them into a capital meeting, or we could take the meeting on the 29th and instead of, we could do it then. But let's put them in the 16th tentatively. We have that on our calendar. It seems like a good idea. And we've had years where we've gotten through everything fast enough to throw a meeting date back. Not that that's a priority, right? But, it's an option. Does that list then square with everybody's?
Yeah,
Good.
can you just send it in an email possibly, or because I wrote it down, but it's pretty sloppy.
Yeah. I can do that.
And then the second thing, do you have the list for the liaisons as well? I don't think I've ever received that list. And I know we added to it and there was some discussion about it last time, but.
Yeah, I was looking through my notes and not finding it. And I know I wrote it down. I think I just put it in a different notebook.
Rob, I just sent it to you in a text.
Oh, my phone's not near me, but, all right, I'll find that and I'll circulate that too. I'll send around 2 documents, liaison assignments, meeting dates and schedules. I'll have it out. It'll take me a day or 2, depending on how some things break, but,
And then the only other question that I had, and this is just more about general process and being new. So last year we went through the process of approving certain capital planning improvements, right? Like the salt shed, for instance, or the police cruisers. And I imagine that there's now plans that are being done to actually complete some of those projects, right? How does that work through this budget process, us talking with the capital budget committee, eventually getting approved, and then eventually the projects being built or completed or purchased? Because I think some of the things that were approved last annual town meeting, at least I don't know where they currently stand, because it seems like, for instance, the salt shed, I go to the dump every week. Like, I haven't seen a new salt shed, right?
Those are regularly updated to capital, Adam. They get updates. We haven't historically done that with advisor. That's probably a very good idea. For example, on the salt shed, because of a supply chain timing issue, a decision was made to wait until after the winter. So we didn't go without a salt shed during any part of the winter. And there was a big fear that that would happen because of supply chain issues with the metal. So that's been postponed till the spring. So it's all contracted for. We have locked in pricing, all of that, but the actual construction was deferred until the spring from the fall because of supply chain. Something similar is happening with the boat ramp that was funded and we got grant funding for. Because of supply chain issues and getting materials for the cofferdam and other items, it was determined that the better answer is to postpone it from now until November. Again, locked in pricing, the contractor signed everything, there's penalty clauses. So it's going to start first thing possible in the fall.
Yeah.
And in terms of equipment, Michelle monitors all this. We talk about it internally too, because my goal is to, if something's approved, I want to start spending that money and moving those projects as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So if you want to have, I can, we can, if you want to schedule Michelle to come in one night, or I could just have a written report sent to all of you. If that's easy, you just tell me what your collective preference is.
Well, it would just be helpful before we have that meeting with Capital Budget Committee. And I think on the 19th, we received that attachment. There were line items. I think there was $800,000 that's being requested by the DPW, for instance, for all the different equipment. But it would be nice to know where the last year project approvals currently stand and whether or not, like you had mentioned, there's already been earmarked or contracted rates that are locked in and what the actual cost is going to be. Because, for instance, like, and I don't remember the list, the Beechwood basketball court was supposed to be renovated. That still hasn't been renovated, right? So there's things that were on the list that were approved that I think as a citizen, I just don't know where they currently stand.
Hence the reason for having a communication person who's going to help package all this stuff and make sure residents see it on a regular basis. It's a good point, Adam, and I'll circle back. I mean, I know Capital talks about this regularly on their agenda and they get updates. There's no reason we can't share those with you folks too. And for the public at large, by the way, it's a good idea.
Fran?
Chris, speaking of communications, I've turned on the Cohasset TV channel, I don't know, probably half a dozen times. There's never anything on there. Are they off the air?
No, they're on the air. You haven't seen me and the last Cohasset Common when we talked to the Chamber of Commerce president. That's a little old. I think they've had some staffing troubles, Fran. I know that Don himself was out for a little while with he had some health issues. I also know they've had a trouble with some kids, getting kids in the to help staff.
Just curious. I've looked at it several times and it's always nothing on. Maybe they've gone off the air, but
no, they have not gone off the air. They do post. They have a website that posts their schedule. I can tell you that we haven't done a whole lot of Cohasset Commons lately. I haven't had a lot of time for that, but they're doing. I would check the website again. We don't run that. That's a private entity that runs that whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, could you just remind me of what subjects we're having on February 16? That's the only one I didn't get down.
There are two. One is DPW plus facilities. And then we're asking for the school department to come in.
Okay, got it.
In each of those meetings, we are going to get material prior to discussing, correct?
Yes,
Hopefully.
that's the plan. That makes the meeting more meaningful.
And that talks about the budget and about the capital planning, right? That's the two focuses.
I'm not certain what you mean.
The sheet.
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all.
If you have not seen it, Don can share a copy of the. Let me let Don speak.
Yeah, so I can send out an example of what we have from last year. I just sent you all the December, but basically what it does is just a summary report. You guys will get all the line item details for each department, but the summary report essentially just shows last year's requested budget, this current year requested budget, the change in dollar value, the change in percentage. We talk about any significant changes to either the operation or the budget request. And then I believe this, we document and note the next 3 years of capital items from their capital plan. And I'll grab a copy of last year's and send that out so that everybody has an understanding of what they'll be receiving for the departments that come before you.
Okay. Then can we move on and approve some minutes? I want to make sure that people have, and I'm not sure that it's quite the case that people have all the minutes in hand.
Well, November 3rd was circulated. That I sent out to everybody. I sent that to you a couple of weeks ago, Rob and Mary.
You did.
So does everyone that was at the February, do we have a quorum of people who were at the November 3rd meeting to vote on the November 3rd minutes?
Jean, Fran, Rob, Patrick.
Yes.
Was that my first meeting?
I don't
No,
think
you
so.
were not on the board yet.
I wasn't on it.
Jean,
Yeah, I don't think so.
Fran, me, Patrick, and Mary. That's it. That's 5. We're a quorum with 5, so we can vote the November minutes. So
Anyone have any changes or issues with those?
Mary?
draft?
There's just
Mary,
one
then Jean.
correction, ironically, on the second page, under topics not reasonably anticipated, Adam's last name is spelled incorrectly.
All right,
along with my email address at that point in time too.
Jean,
Can I just make a blanket statement about minutes in general also? That my first name is spelled incorrectly. It should be Jeanne, and I didn't pick it up until the minutes that we got for December 8th.
the one I'm looking at, it is
Has-
Jeanne. That's correct.
The December 8th minutes, Stone, and I know we're
Oh.
not on that
Well,
yet.
we're on November 3rd. Why don't you wait until we
Yes.
get to December 8th?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. You got the last name
All right.
right. That's saying
No,
something.
that's my bad. Rookie minute taker on the 8th. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. That
So-
explains it.
Subject to the corrections regarding Adam, can we have a motion on the November 3rd minutes?
So move.
Second,
Mary, seconded by Mike. In favor, roll call. Mike Barclay.
I was not at November 3rd.
Oh, right. Then you
Yeah, so I
shouldn't vote.
can't. I
Gina
have to
Stino,
abstain.
you passed
Aye.
tonight's pop quiz. Well done, Mike. Fran Collins,
aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Adam, you weren't there
Nope.
either.
I wasn't there
Mary,
either.
I,
and I vote in the affirmative, so we have, those minutes are approved. Patrick, you know how to file these things?
Yes. I'd send them to Beth as a PDF.
Yeah, they have a naming convention, which I think you probably know that. So then, the December 8th minutes, are those the next ones?
Yes.
Okay, we have December 8th minutes. We also have December 8th executive session minutes, which we can't vote in this meeting. And we'll vote those when we're in the executive session the next time. But on the general minutes, do we have them? Do we have a quorum of we should have a quorum of the people who are present at this meeting, yes?
yep,
We
Okay.
have four.
yeah,
4?
You have 4 people who were at the December 8th meeting.
we only had
Well,
5
sure.
at the meeting, so
So
Oh,
you're fine.
all right.
Okay.
If it's an OML violation, the sin is on my head. We're gonna vote them, and I think it still probably puts us in the first quartile of Cohasset committees with filed minutes. So let's just, unless anybody has does anybody have any comments on the substance of them first? Okay, then, and also I haven't, they're not coming up on my machine. Who are the 4 of us who were there?
Adam, Jean, Mike, and Mary.
That's 5.
It says Mark too. Did you say his name?
But he's not here this evening.
Not here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard Mike. It was Mark. All right. So, can I have a motion from one of the 3 of you who's not me?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Jean, second.
Second,
December
I
8th.
think I heard Mary first. So, then by roll call vote, Adam Eamon,
Aye.
Gina Stino,
Aye.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
aye,
and me, I'm an aye. So
Aye.
those votes carry. Those minutes are approved, rather. We will reserve in the executive session minutes. Do we have any more minutes in front of us?
No.
No. Okay.
What we're waiting for is, just so everybody knows, there's an October 27 meeting that we need minutes for that are on my plate, but unfortunately I can't find my notes, so I'm gonna have to go back to the tape. And our last meeting from 2 weeks ago, that's on my plate as well. Unfortunately, I lost power for most of the weekend while everybody else in town had power. So, and was dealing with snow. So that's when I was planning to get to the rest of these minutes. And nothing in my house froze, thankfully.
Okay. Thanks. Then we'll get those when we get them. Thanks, Patrick. So, where does that leave us? I think, I don't think there's anything that I could think of that's developed in the last 48 hours. We've talked plenty about upcoming meetings and schedules. Is there anything else we need to discuss? Hearing nothing. Thanks very much. I'll circulate those two lists. Mary and Jean, we'll look forward to seeing our friends from the school committee in 2 weeks, and also,
Hopefully.
what was that?
Hopefully.
Yeah, and also we have DPW and facilities, and who's ever liaisoning with them, liaising, I guess is the verb, should maybe get in touch, and if Chris has anything that, to add to that, so that we just have something squared away coming in, and Don will help us with a face sheet for that. We'll have a good, productive meeting. So, good, thanks. Is there anything else? I don't want to. Hearing nothing
Like a
then.
motion to adjourn.
We have to have a motion to adjourn, exactly.
Second.
I'll move that.
Quick to the draw. We have a motion to adjourn made and seconded. Adam Amon,
Aye.
Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy. I
On
think we
mute.
can.
Aye.
Patrick, can we adjourn? Excellent,
Aye.
excellent. And me, I'm an aye as well. So very good. Thank you very much. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.